Welcome to Fandom Power.
Hey, welcome back to Fandom Power, the show where we talk about all things pop culture. My name is Wes Arscott, and today we're going to be talking about, I think it's an interesting subject, certainly one that's come around. I guess it's always maybe kind of been there, but now with the advent of the internet and online forums, it may have kind of reached a peak or a zenith in the last couple of years, and that's gatekeeping, which kind of leads into toxic fandom, something that I think we've all kind of experienced in one form or another. And to talk about toxic fandom and gatekeeping with me tonight, I have here in the studio with me my lovely wife, Kimberly.
Hey, everyone.
My recording partner, producer, and editor, Andy.
Hello.
And in Toronto tonight by telephone, our good friend of the show, Eric Swenson.
Ahoy hoy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming in tonight to want to talk about something that I guess I always thought of it as being something that was kind of innocent until I really started to look at this in the last, well, I wouldn't say the last couple of years, but more so, especially now that I'm really kind of digging down into all of the pop culture subjects for the show particularly. But I guess I always sort of reliquated a lot of the stuff that we see online as just being like, I guess this is going to sound really silly because having done the research that I've done over the last couple of days, I've come to this conclusion that it's not just passion, but I was very quick to write it off as passion. And I think that's kind of where, you know, the whole notion comes from. It's, you know, people are passionate about the thing that they like, whether it's a movie or, you know, a TV show or a comic book. I mean, is this not the classic, you know, when we were kids, you know, in the schoolyard and you had your comic book rolled up in your back pocket and you unrolled it and maybe it was an X-Men comic book, but your buddy beside you, he might have had like a Justice League of America comic, and then you went into that why, you know, Marvel is better than DC or why DC is better than Marvel. I think these are
That's a couple episodes away.
Well, these are the classic conversations that we've had for years and years and years, and it kind of lends into that, the subjectivity of, you know, why my music is better than yours and why, you know, why Star Wars is better than Star Trek, you know, all these conversations that at some point, you know, maybe were kind of innocent and on some level still are. We're talking about a level of passion that goes beyond that, where it starts to become hurtful and in some cases even dangerous and at its worst, deadly. So,
yeah, really.
Yeah, I mean, these are just, I guess there's just some of the examples that I talked about, you know, the whole Star Wars versus Star Trek thing. And, you know, we run a secondary show here, a sub-show every week where we review the newest episode of The Mandalorian. And since we've been doing that, and I've done casual movie reviews before for my own sort of entertainment purposes and kind of posted it on my own social media, but I've never done it before with the intent to put it out to like a target audience like I'm doing now. And I this week alone, I was the subject of some of that backlash that was potentially kind of hurtful. Fortunately, like I'm well enough that, you know, the hurtful things that were said to me didn't really impact me too much, and you know, I'm okay. But I guess I'm just getting a little sliver, a little taste of what it's like to be on the receiving end of that. So I guess, like I said before, sort of the from where I'm sitting, the lead into this is it all stems from passion, whether that passion is, you know, directed in a healthy direction or whether it's misguided. I think the people who are doing it in some cases, they genuinely believe what they're saying. They believe that they're right. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think everybody is opinionated, right? And they don't mean it to be rude and they don't mean it to be hurtful, but what you like is what you like. And if you think you know the most about it, you always have that little protective barrier around it, right? So if someone else likes it, it's a little bit of this healthy competition, right?
Yeah.
I know more than you, and
yeah.
Did you know this? Did you know that? I think it's, and unfortunately, sometimes people take it to the extreme, and that's where the really negative effects come out, right? Because they've maybe taken it too personally.
Maybe.
And it's their own thing, and how dare you like the same thing I do, it's mine. And
well, you actually bring up one of the things that when I was doing my notes, and I was kind of looking like for some of these indicators of what kind of maybe indicates sort of gatekeeping, and you touched on one perfectly, Kim, where it's like somebody who knows something more will always challenge a fan with that knowledge, so it becomes this almost like a purity test. Mm-hmm. Like, if you don't know as much as I do, you can't be a real fan, you know? And on some level, it's okay to share that knowledge. It's okay to share that knowledge in the sense of, you know, did you know that this thing that we're talking about, you know, is connected to this other thing over here? Because I want to share that with you. And that's where the passion comes from. But the other side of that is, oh, you didn't know that thing? You can't be a real fan, or you're not a real fan, or you're not as good as I am, or, you know, I feel the need to put you down. That's where it's not passionate anymore. And it's not fun anymore.
No, but I think that situation, okay, say someone who is very well versed in a topic is talking to someone who's just discovering that license. They won't say those things, but it comes across. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've experienced that where I've gotten into something, you know, and it's you're not versed in it. You don't know the history. You're just learning the characters. You're just discovering it. It's all new and exciting. But someone else has been into it for years, and they won't come out and say, well, you can't be a fan. But it's alluded to. It's like, oh, aren't you sweet? You know what I mean?
I think pre-internet, there was I know what you're saying, and I'm just trying to phrase it right so that it gets across. I think it's almost like an air of superiority. And I think pre-internet, when like people would have these conversations like we're having now, but having them face to face, like the whole Marvel is better than DC, and you would have that conversation and you would defend your position, you know, like fervently. But if somebody wasn't up to snuff, like you'd squash them. And even, just this whole, like, there is an air of superiority, or an air of like you say, oh, that's nice.
Right.
Like, you just kind of, it's a dismissiveness, I think.
A little bit. And it's, again, I don't think they're that select few that it's very negative, but I think it just comes with the territory.
Have you checked out any YouTube comments section on some of the channels that I follow?
No.
Because you would learn that it's a lot bigger than what you think it is.
And I'm sure it is, but I just can't. I go through my Facebook and the pages I follow, like, I'll read a few comments and it's like, okay, this is just draining. But people are very in, you know, whether it's about fandom or the election or this, or they're in there and they're saying stuff over. Like, it's just, how do you have the energy to do that?
Yeah, I think, doesn't that lend itself, though, to that whole idea of the internet has given everybody a voice, and now suddenly that, well, I mean, everybody had a voice prior to that, but now everybody's
now
opinion.
Everybody has a megaphone.
Sure they do.
Exactly.
Sure. And now everybody thinks that, you know, all opinions are equal because they can share it to the entire world with a keystroke.
Well, and unfortunately, we live in a world that, you know, quote unquote, I hate to say it, but fake news and lies. Like, there's no, it doesn't matter if what you're saying isn't true. If you say it enough times and you say it loud enough, there's going to be people that agree with you.
Yeah.
God, that's depressing.
It is depressing. But that's the internet, I feel.
No,
that's my opinion, right? Like, that's just...
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just, it's not something that you like to hear or think about on a regular basis, because
I think people don't like to be confronted with their isms, you know, and if there's a chance that maybe you fall into one of those isms, you know, even ever so slightly, having to look at yourself in the mirror through that lens can be often
it's very jarring.
Sure, it definitely can be that.
Vexing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess I want to first preface this by saying I was listening to you go through some of the notes earlier, and we've been talking a little bit about this topic over the last week or so. Yeah. And I've made some conclusions on behalf of the devil's advocate side of this
that
I'm going to be sharing.
Would love to share those thoughts, because I mean that's part of the conversation, isn't it?
The preface that I want to make is that some of these things I might agree with, but some of them I definitely don't, and I'm just sharing them for posterity's sake. So,
yeah, of course.
So now that the disclaimer is out of the way.
All right. So before anybody attacks Eric as being the dissenting jerk.
But isn't that, he shouldn't even have to say that.
That's right. You shouldn't.
Do you know what I mean?
That's true, but now that we live in this internet age,
that's
everything has to come with a disclaimer, and that's
sure.
part of what this whole culture has become, which is a sad thing to say out loud and realize.
What's interesting is that we're talking about somebody challenging your opinion, and in this case, that's exactly what it is. It's pure opinion. It isn't like informed opinion. It's genuinely. Oh no,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I feel the need to say these things because I don't think many people would, and I think that if you were to be bringing them up in an argument or
sure.
or for the more friendly choice of word, a discussion.
Yeah.
Someone would look at you and go, "I can't believe you're even saying that right now," or something along those lines, right? So,
well, I thought, this was a perfect part of the reason why I thought you'd be a great guest for this one, Eric, was after we did the Star Wars episode, and you joked a couple of times about feeling like the young kid in the room, right? And I thought, this is something that
that's true.
You probably live closer to more on a day-to-day base than, say, like Kim or myself, who are 10 years older than you are, right?
Yes, as the resident millennial, I can say this is something we deal with regularly.
Well, I didn't want to say it that way, but...
Well, I also have to say, being a female, I'm kind of in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting both sides of the...
Doesn't matter what my age is, I've already got a disadvantage because I'm female.
Oh, that's true,
Yeah.
You do...
A lot of gatekeeping comes from the...
what's genuinely considered male-dominated...
cisgendered male-dominated side of things.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Which, here comes one of the unpopular things. The fact is, a lot of things are male-dominated because men are dominant. It's partly biology, it's partly,
sure.
the way society works.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks, and it's definitely not fair, but men create and control a lot of stuff. And, we're working on it. We're getting better.
Well, I mean, we live in a time where we now know that the casting couch is a real thing.
It is a real thing, and it's disgusting. They should clean it more often.
There's a lot of kick-ass women that are getting into powerful positions, though.
But it's taken this long for them to have their moment, and maybe that's not the right word, their moment, because they should continue to have those moments, and it shouldn't just be a page in history. It should be like entire chapters, and it's not, and we're getting there. At least I'd like to think that we're getting there. We're just not there yet.
Yeah. So I wanted to start off just by saying I don't think that all gatekeeping is done specifically for exclusive purposes. I think that sometimes gatekeeping is less about like, no, you can't be a fan because you don't have the base of information that I do, or you don't, you can't rattle off the names of all of the droids in Star Wars. Like,
well, then that count me out, man, because I can't do that.
Yeah, I listen to the episodes, man. But I think that some of it is like it's protective. It's I love this thing. This thing is I love it so much that I've made it a part of my personality, a part of who I am. Yeah. And it's about keeping people at arm's length so that you don't get hurt.
There's some definite, there's some, listen, man, I am currently wearing a Transformer tattoo. So when we talk about like taking pop culture iconology and making it part of our identity, I totally see how that lends itself to the gatekeeping aspect of whatever that is. There's a long list of things that I could go through that I would say define me as a person, and I kind of I covet them as if they are mine and only mine.
Exactly.
But I do it more privately.
And that's why you were so hurt by the Michael Bay movies.
Ugh.
We all know how this works.
You know what? That's a great example, though, right? I mean, I no secret here. As a Transformer guy, I'm one of those what they refer to as a G1er. That's my generation. I love the G1 continuity, even if the TV show does not really hold up all that well. I like those designs.
Not very well at all.
No, no.
We love it, but
the show itself does not hold up very well. It's the 86 movie is still pretty cool and it's still fun to watch, but the actual weekly episodes are just kind of like, oh.
Absolutely. So I think in a very limited context, there are some aspects of gatekeeping that are perhaps not healthy, but at least understandable.
Absolutely.
Like it's not some abhorrent aberration of
no, not at all.
Oh, how dare you love, the Orville? It's not Star Trek. Well, I would argue that it's more Star Trek than some of the recent ones, but
you wouldn't be alone in that either.
To each their own, right?
Yeah.
I can appreciate what, the Family Guy people are doing with the Star Trek oeuvre.
Yes.
For lack of a better series, but
I think, Eric, we're saying the same thing, really. I mean,
yeah.
What it boils down to that fans are passionate people.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter what the thing is, you're going to find somebody who is all in. And, maybe they don't mean any sort of harm by their enthusiasm. And I think those people are like genuine. I see them a lot. Like, for example, in 2014, I went to my first Kiss concert, and I had never experienced that before. And the types of fans that we saw there, one thing, all those guys that say that, Kiss isn't Kiss anymore because it doesn't have all the original members, those people aren't coming to the concerts. Do you know what I mean? They're not, because everybody we talked to was either like crazy, like over the top, I'm painted from head to toe, or they were there for the music. They didn't care, that it wasn't Peter Criss and Ace Frehley, in the band anymore. They were just there to experience a Kiss concert. So
they wanted to rock and roll all night and have a wonderful day.
Right. And so passion,
and we really did, because that concert was awesome.
It is in my top. I'm not kidding, man. That's probably my number one of all the concerts I've been to in terms of like concert going experience. That's my number one.
Well, from the moment they started to the moment they ended, it was you're on like 10 the whole way.
Yeah, it was a solid, like, it was like being on the receiving end of a Rocky Balboa movie. Like just being
given what we're talking about, that's 100% passion, right?
Yeah.
They're in there. They're going to give you the best possible thing they can do, and that's why people get passionate about it, because like these guys are making sure we have a good time. And anybody who can do that in this crazy, messed up world is,
and speaking of that,
at least a step ahead.
Yeah, Andy.
Great reference there, Eric.
I try. I really
do.
We talked in a previous episode about, the intellectual property in general and how it becomes a living, breathing thing. And once you put it out into the world, it's not yours anymore. It becomes the property of the fans.
Unless you're J.K. Rowling.
Well, yeah, I guess.
Boom.
Yeah.
See? Even I'm doing it. I'm hating on someone who loves a thing in a different way than me.
I like the thing. It's not my thing, but I appreciate it for what it is. I maybe just don't appreciate her public her
actions behind it.
Yeah.
I think that's what's tarnished it, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I can have an appreciation for the Michael Bay movies, and you and I can still be friends.
Don't get me wrong. Like you have to remember. Let me quantify this. I just want to tell you, I've seen every Transformer film in theater. You know, I spent my money to go and see them because it was Transformers, and bad or not, I was going to go and see them.
That's the mark of a true fan. You'll go and see something even if you know it's not going to be what you want.
Listen, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am such a Star Wars nerd that if you took a rock and you painted the words Star Wars on it and told me it was new, I would sit there and stare at it.
Christmas presents.
I'm getting a Star Wars rock for Christmas.
You're done. The list is done.
All right.
Oh, that's funny.
But talking about movies, if I can just say.
Of course you can.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty easygoing, whatever. But when the Ghostbuster movie came out with the girls, I have to say I was like, how dare they? No, you can't change it.
You as a woman say
Me,
that. Yeah.
I was like, no, because it was the original guys. Like, those are the guys. What are you doing? Oh, my God.
I think the biggest problem that a lot of people had with that is that by gender swapping them and just changing some of the smaller details, like, you know, they're not in a fire hall, they're changing the smaller things like that.
Yeah.
You're missing the point of what Ghostbusters was.
Well,
and why it was successful. It's because those guys had the best chemistry that has ever been seen on screen. And they took a movie that was a weird premise and made something beautiful.
As Dan Aykroyd says, they turned his family business into a $1 million movie.
Yeah, because he was
his
Ghost
father.
Hunters.
His father is actually one of the country's leading paranormal investigators. He's written a couple of books about it. Yeah.
That's funny.
Footnotes, Andy. Footnotes.
Well, Dan Aykroyd still hosts a number of shows.
Yeah, he does.
Like,
That's
I think
right.
there's one now, Haunted Hotels.
Yes.
Yeah.
That he is currently playing host to.
So, listeners, if
he makes good vodka.
He does, right? Crystal Head or Crystal? Is it Crystal Head?
Crystal Skull.
Crystal Skull. I was just going to say, listeners, if you're just new to the show, Kim and Andy are actually currently developing our third show, which may or may not be. I don't know if it's going to. I think it's going to be a standalone show.
I don't know. I think we could go for like a monthly thing.
Yeah, but it's going to be under its own branding, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, so Kim and Andy are working on their own show that's going to be a paranormal. Does paranormal cover it all, really?
Kind of, but not really.
It can be broken down.
Supernatural,
Yeah.
paranormal,
Cryptids.
One more
dimensional.
One more feather in our cap to look forward to.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's, we've...
If I could just get back to the Ghostbusters.
Of course you can. I was going to bring you right back.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Not
it's
at
all
all.
good. Having that initial, how dare they?
Yeah.
But then we went to the movies to see the girls. And we went into it thinking, okay, let's just look at it as its own movie. And we did, and it was really good. We liked it.
I loved it.
And
I loved it for what it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't terrible. Like, it was much better than I gave it credit for, and I went into it expecting to be like, I was the curmudgeon. I was like, this is going to be awful. I don't know what. I didn't pay for it. I waited for it to be free. That's how petty I was.
I just went at it.
And it was better than I thought.
I went at it from the opinion of, and this is something that I've said many times before, before we had a podcast even, is that, we live in a world of, and people like to say, like, there's no more original ideas. And I want to go back and say, remakes and reboots are not a new idea, people. They've been doing them since the dawn of cinema. We just finally watched A Star Is Born. That movie's been remade 3 times. Like, come on. This is not new territory we're talking about. So,
I didn't know it was made 3 times.
But there's a reason why they keep going back to this stuff, because those stories at their core, or whatever the core idea of the thing is that we're remaking, it resonates on some level. So it's worth looking at again, maybe through a different lens.
Or a fresh take on it.
Wasn't there some scholar who said that there are only really like 6 stories?
6 storylines in Hollywood, I think, is the line. I don't know. I'm not a film scholar per se, so it was Kevin Bacon, yeah. And he was at both ends of that, right?
Yeah, that's right. It all involves Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. From Kevin Bacon to Kevin Bacon. Oh my God.
That's funny.
Kevin Bacon is a Mobius strip? What?
Or Boros.
Yeah. So passion, in and of itself is not gatekeeping, and it's it can be healthy and it can be fun and it can be all those schoolyard conversations that we talked about, you know.
And going back to what Kim said about the competition aspect, and even what Eric said about the male-driven thing, rooted in that schoolyard establishing dominance for lack of a better term, the nerds back then, all outcasts in their own right, found it to group together, but then established almost a leadership role or a hierarchy.
It was a hierarchy within their communities.
And because, like you said, now you're never alone now. Back then you were. Yeah. And, you know, to become king of the nerds was great.
Yeah, for sure. For sure it was.
There was I forget what I was listening to, but I was listening to a podcast and there was mention of, like, as soon as something has any sort of value to a group of people, a hierarchy is going to arise. Like, it doesn't matter if it's money, if it's information, it doesn't matter what it is. As soon as somebody wants more of it, there's going to be a hierarchy involved. And a lot of people get, you know, really hissy about things like, the patriarchy, and I don't want to go super wide on this, but, like, people get really mad that these systems exist. It's like, well, these systems exist because we're social creatures. It's not something we can get away from. And I mean, complaining about it might make you feel better for a little while, but like, you got to realize there's a system here that works, and it's why we have buildings and electricity and air conditioning. Like, people get very bogged down in the minutia of, like, you know, why something matters. It's not necessarily why something matters, it's that it matters. As soon as somebody likes something enough to go out of their way for it, then there's power involved. You know what I mean?
I think so. Yeah, I do.
I'm getting a little wide. Like, I got to tell you, ever since I got out of high school, I've been reading a lot of philosophy books.
Yes.
So I've sort of become a bit of a philosophy nerd, which again
that's your passion.
It's my passion. It's what I do when I'm not, you know, talking about Transformers or Marvel or whatever else we want to stereotype me as being a fan of.
Let's dig into one of those, Eric, and this is one that you've been itching to talk about. I know we've had this offline before, and this will tie into sort of what Kim was saying earlier about as a woman and being alienated from stuff. Let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons for a second.
Oh, buddy.
So first, I just this
will be fun.
When it comes to gatekeeping, I'm just going to put this one out here. In the role-playing community, especially in the Dungeons and Dragons community, keep in mind, Dungeons and Dragons is on its officially on its 5th iteration. We're talking about a game that came out in the year I was born, 1974?
Yep.
Yeah, so
something like that.
What's in Dungeons and Dragons circles, what's referred to as the edition wars. You know, which edition is the best edition, and you know.
Well, here, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you define THAC0 for me?
2-hit armor class of 0.
Okay. See, now you've raised up a tier in my D&D reckonings.
Yeah, THACO. 2-hit armor class of 0.
There are people who can't answer that question, and
I would be one of those.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I just lost some points.
Did you lose some street cred?
I think so.
That's okay.
Oh, that's okay. You're a woman who has any knowledge of D&D. You're automatically up there. That's how this works.
You just got a compliment.
Okay.
Because the look I just got from Kim,
I was like, wait a minute.
She was like, she thought you were going down the. She thought she was about to be insulted.
Oh no. See, when you're a pimply, slightly pudgy, nerdy dude sitting in a cramped, very humid basement with 5 other dudes drinking Mountain Dew and Cheetos, you really, anything that has an extra X chromosome just automatically elevates the scene.
Yeah.
So even if it's just your mom bringing down the Hot Pockets.
Ma'am?
Yes, hon.
More Hot Pockets.
Right away, hon.
I'm spewing a lot of bullshit here, people. Please do not take any of that at face value.
I think it's fair to say that we know that there is a certain level of jest that goes with this.
But yeah, no, like,
you guys would have had so many awesome campaigns if you just let the girls play.
We're getting to that. We're not there yet. We're getting to that.
Okay.
I started playing in early 3.5.
Okay, we're going there already.
Yeah.
All right.
But I now exclusively, and I haven't done much of it, but I exclusively play in 5e.
The most current edition.
The most current edition. A big part of that is because I started watching Critical Role, which is a great show, and I recommend anybody who wants to get a taste of what D&D could be. Take a look at Critical Role.
Another reason to listen to Matt Mercer.
Oh, I could listen to him just read a menu.
Yeah.
But anyway, the biggest reason for me that I'm so supportive of 5e is because it's taken the core of what D&D is and extracted it out of the web of rules upon rules upon rules upon rules.
You mean it's taken the math out of it?
Oh, that's literally what it is. There's no more math.
So
that makes me happy.
We had a conversation about this with Henry, our friend Henry, who's been on the show before, and he plays 5th edition with his son, and he likes to put it this way. He's like, Henry's an old role-playing gamer, much like we are, having played for, many years of our life. And he's like, I'm standing in the store, and I have the new Dungeons and Dragons book in one hand, and I have its competitor, Pathfinder, in my other hand. And I turn to the guy behind the counter, and I'm like, I'm going to play this with my 10-year-old son. And they said, you want Dungeons and Dragons because the learning curve is so much more shallow because they've stripped out throughout the editions, the multiple editions. It seemed like for a while that each iteration would sort of pack more nuts and bolts on top of what had come before it. And then it becomes this big cumbersome where it's more...
There was, in 3.5, there was the book for desert campaigns. There was a book for tundra campaigns. There was a book just for arcane spellcasters.
That's right.
There was a book just for, tricksters, and there was a book all about the good gods and the bad gods. It was very much like you could see at the heart of it. There's the core 3 books.
That's right.
And then it just spider webs out into all of these little specialty things.
What?
So you would eventually be making characters with, a feat from book X and a skill from book Y.
So that speaks
you'd have to bring up 12 pounds of books to a session.
That speaks to the notion of, the big mega corporation that just wants your money, right? I mean, yeah. I've said this before, that the people who own Dungeons and Dragons, which is Hasbro, by the way, through their Wizards of the Coast imprint, I've always kind of jokingly referred to them as the Microsoft of the gaming industry, in that they would certainly across 3rd edition, they would put something out every month, whether it was good or not. And game balance didn't really seem to factor into those publications. But lo and behold, we get to 5th edition, and 5th edition is this stripped down version of the game that at its core still looks like Dungeons and Dragons. It still uses the same 6 core attributes that have been around since 1974. Those haven't changed really. And it's fresh, and it's currently the best-selling version of the game in history.
The way I've described the difference to people, the easiest way I've found to describe it is that older editions of D&D are science. 5e is art.
Yeah, well, see, I disagree with you on that, and only because I think there's some blurred lines there, whereas, like, and this isn't
we're
really
not going to agree 100% on
of course
everything
we're not.
here, dude.
I've been playing since 2nd edition, but I spent money on 3rd. And 3rd edition is my edition only because it is the one I spent all the money on, and it's one
you bought in.
And it's the one that I know the best. But when we talk about all that, the nuts and bolts and the crunchiness of it, the game almost became like a simulation, and like a tactical simulation, and less of a dramatic play.
Role-playing game?
Right. But I like that. I like that aspect of it.
That's again, man. You were raised on Coke, and now we've got New Coke, and
I was around for New Coke,
and it's not for you.
I was also around when Coke said we made a mistake with New Coke and ditched it. So that's kind of my little take on the edition wars, right? You'll have these people who will defend their edition to the end of time, and sometimes it's with like extreme prejudice. Like, if you don't know what you're, like, you just said it, tell me what Thaco means. If you didn't know, People would be out there. You didn't know what Thaco meant. Like, what are you doing in here? Get out of here.
You call yourself a fan?
Right.
I find it amazing that you guys reference it as saying, instead of saying, hey, I started playing when I was like 15 or 16 or whatever, you're like, I started playing on 2nd edition, 3rd edition. I'm like, how old are you? That means nothing to me.
That's
3rd edition came
fair.
out when I was 7 or 8.
3rd edition would have came out right around
90 something?
2000.
2000?
Yeah, around 99, 2000.
I have
no way.
Yeah, it did. Because I didn't start playing it until I was posted to Petawawa, so that would have been in 2000.
You were playing before then.
But I wasn't playing 3rd edition. I was playing 2nd.
Oh
so now the edition war thing, I think we've kind of handled.
Yeah,
enough.
we've covered it.
But here's the thing we were talking about before. Like I said earlier on in the show that I may have been guilty of some of the gatekeeping aspects of this, and this is a classic example where we talk about the male domination of certain fandoms or certain properties. And I mean, my first role-playing groups, my high school role-playing groups were male only to the point where it was like no women allowed. No, like
they would distract us from the purity of the game.
No women allowed, because I think I can say this now as a 40-something looking back and kind of through the lens of the wisdom I have with me now, but it's like it was just assumed that it was just a guy thing. Like we never really expected girls to be into this stuff.
Girls are nerds too.
Well, see, and now I know that, but as a 15-year-old kid, I couldn't really comprehend that because the marketing, the millions of hours of television that I had watched up until then said that you wanted to play with My Little Ponies and dolls. It didn't.
I think also, in my opinion, is that the age, teenagers.
Yeah.
If, and nerds back then when we were teenagers was almost a bad thing. It wasn't a cool thing.
Get those nerds! Nerd! Nerd!
Yeah, it was a curse or a slur.
Well,
That's
it wasn't.
why you were in the basement.
Right. So if you don't want to let the girls know you play this because it's not cool.
There was part of that. Like I've often said, like this goes back to like in our first episode on the What is Fandom episode, I'd asked a question about, was there ever a time in your life where you felt that you had to conceal your passion from somebody else? Yep, we kind of did.
But really, girls didn't care. It's just the perception, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. First, there's a thriving My Little Pony roleplay community right now,
which I never played with.
But I think everyone sort of turns into. This is sort of why Gollum as a character resonates, because everybody has a little bit of that. This is my precious.
Precious.
Yeah.
I must keep it safe and away.
Again,
everyone's got a little bit of that in them.
That passion where it becomes covetous and it's like, it's my thing and you can't possibly like my thing, because if you like my thing, it's not mine anymore.
Yeah, you can take pride in whatever you want, but pride is a sin. And we hide our sins.
I suppose, yeah, we do.
Some people do.
Yeah.
Some people wear them on their sleeve and walk around the White House with them.
So, I mean, Kim as not only as my wife, but as a pop culture nerd, as big a pop culture nerd as I am, had attempted to penetrate the inner circle when we were teenagers and was basically stonewalled.
Oh my God, we were.
Well, see, because she was a woman using the phrase penetrate, and that's not.
Oh, I didn't use that word.
With at 15.
I feel like I set that up the wrong way.
I think you did.
Well, there's a fantastic scene in the latest season of Stranger Things where their core group of D&D players kind of take offense to 11 coming in, because basically she is taking him away from the group.
Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I haven't thought about that in a while, but that's an excellent look at exactly what we're talking about.
Well, I have to say, as a woman, like, I'm part of your group.
That's right.
We play now.
We do.
Maybe not in the last few months because of COVID, but I can say, and I think I've said it before in another episode, like, we'd be playing, and I'm playing with 3 men who have played D&D for years, and they're kind of surprised sometimes of me handling a certain situation a certain way, because they wouldn't have done that, or this is a certain monster and you should kill it a certain way, and I'm oblivious. And I'm like, well, I'll just,
I think that the most important thing you need to take out of that particular experience is, first of all, that's metagaming, and metagaming should be discouraged at all costs. But secondly, that's the whole reason you should, as a role player, want to bring in people from different genders, social backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, whatever you want, whatever subdivision you want to use, because those people are going to have a different way of looking at things and a different way of solving problems just based on their core personal values. And when you see someone else, like, that's not how I would kill a beholder, but you did it successfully, so hey, I learned something new.
Yeah, the guys were totally welcoming. It's not like they were like a negative, but I think it was more of a surprising, hey, why did you do this? Or we never thought of doing that.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, it was never a negative or coming down, but.
Well, again, I think you got to realize that we're a little bit more emotionally mature than the average 15-year-old.
It actually took us a bit of time, because we talked this out quite a few times, and I didn't realize that we were doing it when Kim, like you say, Eric, the whole idea of metagaming, which we didn't mean to do it. We thought
no, I never
it was just
took it as a
table
bad.
talk, but we did in the end come to the conclusion that was intimidating for you.
It was a little, only because
It made you feel like you were doing something wrong.
yes, and because I didn't know all the rules, or I didn't know all the spells, or, you know, like, I should use this in this situation or that. And so, you know, you guys knew all the history and the learning curve you had down pat, and I was just kind of learning. So it can be intimidating, but you guys were welcoming. It wasn't like I liked playing. It was just, it can be daunting a little bit, right?
If I was to describe to you guys, like, you come around a corner and you spot this large insectoid beast with flakes of rust coming off of it. Wes, you know exactly what that is.
I know where you're going with that. I wasn't going to say anything, but sure.
I would suggest that perhaps, Kim, I don't know if you do.
No.
So all that is that Wes has been playing for 15, 20 years, and you just started.
Sometimes I have a hard time separating what I know from what my character knows, and that's where you end up having that table talk with another player who's as well versed as you are, not thinking of Kim, who's like just learning this stuff for the first time, and she's like, what am I doing?
It was like that deck of cards that Scott's character had.
Yes.
Oh my God, you didn't.
Oh my,
we
see,
didn't.
Eric even knows all I had to say was deck of cards.
But our friend Scott, who had never really, he was aware of it, but he'd never played with a deck of many things before, and when it came to the draw, he's like 8. We're like, what? He's like 8. You're taking 8?
I know exactly what that is.
Sure.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's horrible. It was horrible. Especially,
I think he died.
He pulled the death card.
Yeah.
But you guys, the reaction was like, oh my God. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what? It's a deck of cards. What's the problem?
Yeah.
If we gave you another 10 or 12 years of experience, you would understand that the deck of many things is a legendary magic item.
Well, I know that now.
And it has a bunch of really cool good effects, but an equal number of really cool bad effects.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's notorious for absolutely killing games, because people will just pull from the deck until the death card comes out, and then they're fighting the Grim Reaper. And you didn't have that depth of knowledge, but as soon as you said the word deck of cards, I immediately knew what you were you were talking about.
I can picture you in your apartment cringing at the word card.
But again, all of that is that we have more experience in this thing than you, and you know, as an emotionally mature, or what I like to claim as an emotionally mature adult, I can say that as a younger man, I would have absolutely discounted you for that, and to my shame, like, that's who I was back in the day. And again, it sort of goes back to what I was talking about before about self-protection.
Yeah.
Like, some of these things at least back in the day, sometimes even now, but some of these things, you're ashamed that you like them. Like, oh, I can't possibly like, anime. Anime is for little kids and girls. Well, No, it's not. But there's a prevailing perception that you have experienced in some way from the rest of society that says, no, you can't like that thing openly. Are you mad?
Yeah. I think that speaks to the uninitiated, I guess, the people who are not into pop culture, you know, or not into anything that you're into, have a tendency to judge it as if it's something that's beneath them. You know, I mean, we've said it before, you know, you can make fun of me for playing Dungeons and Dragons, but you putting on your sports jersey and screaming at your TV and throwing stuff is somehow more acceptable.
Or paying however much it costs to go and watch cars turn left. Like,
okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? Everyone has something that somebody else is going to consider ridiculous.
I think to tie it all together, and to go back to something you had said earlier, Eric, about adding how the presence of, you know, that other chromosome just adds depth and more to your game. I think that's true of all aspects of pop culture and of fandom particularly, is that, you know, much like I had said, you know, having that knowledge and spewing it out like it's just common knowledge, not realizing that it's intimidating Kim. I think if we all sort of took that step back with whatever it is, with our passion, with our gatekeeping when it comes to welcoming new people into our fandom, that we'd all have, you know, a better experience with it, and those new fans would feel more welcome.
Yeah, if you're only cooking with salt, then pepper is going to taste absolutely foreign to you.
I want to ask a question here, and it kind of ties into what you had said earlier, the same thing about having women at the gaming table. What's everybody think about diversity casting in film and TV right now?
I'm here to represent the unpopular opinion.
Okay. That's
and
fair.
I'm going to do that first.
Sure.
Diversity casting for the sake of diversity casting to appease the diversity people should be frowned upon implicitly.
So what you're saying is there should be no quota.
I don't think that there should be any basis for you to go, well, we have to put a black character in so that we capture the black audience. Or we have to do this so that, you know, the LGBT people don't get offended. Or we have to... I don't think that constraining an art form so as to not offend a group of people is ridiculous and abhorrent.
Interesting.
That comes from back in the day when I used to want to be a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
I came to the conclusion, and you can see it in people like Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr, who are wildly successful right now for simply saying how they feel and speaking truth. I don't think there is a line. Or if there is a line, I don't see why you can't step over it from time to time to make a point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Not everybody is going to like what you're saying. But in the words of Dave Chappelle, you clicked on my face. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean that comes with the understanding that you're going to hear, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and you've chose to be here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or going back to the J.K. Rowling stuff, she's retroactively, quote unquote, ruining this series that I grew up with. But again, these are her opinions that
still
she's tacking on after the fact. You don't have to read her opinions. You can just go read the books.
That's right. Those things still exist in the form that they were originally created, and they are there for everyone to consume and enjoy the way that they always have. But
unfortunately for her and those books.
Yeah.
Yes, the books are a story about a boy, but she's tied to it. Right? Like she's part of it, regardless of being in the story. Her name's always associated with it.
That's right.
It's her.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
she's part of that entity. It's not just some, you know, ghostwriter who's written this book, and that would be different. But she's part of it. So for her to have these opinions, of course it affects the story because she's so ingrained with it. If she had kept herself more out or changed her name like some authors do,
well,
that would be maybe a different situation.
I understand what you're getting at there, but I feel like you can absolutely separate somebody's works from the person themselves. Like, there are anecdotes that J.R.R. Tolkien was an awful person. I don't know where they came from. I don't know who I heard them from, but
if he was making those comments or those things now in this day and age, it would be different.
Right.
I agree with that. Nobody has anonymity anymore.
No.
But you have to consider. I think that's something that we as a society have to start considering now. Is that back in the day when these things were made, that was not considered, evocative or forbidden. It was just something that you could say.
I think it was, and I think it was taboo even then. It was just, it wasn't talked about, and now people think they can say whatever they want, good or bad, right?
Well,
without consequences.
I think that the other side of that coin is that there are people who think that you can't say anything that you want, and this is what it was kind of getting at with the comedy stuff, is like there are tons of people who have invested in this cancel culture. Like, you said one thing one time when you were much younger, and now we're going to throw it in your face and get you fired from your job. It's like, well, if we can't admit that as younger people we were less educated and may have had different opinions, then as a society we're inherently broken.
I think go ahead, Andy.
That's the situation James Gunn was
I
in
was
there.
Just about to name drop him.
Yeah.
James Gunn, who has been the victim of this, I shouldn't say the victim, who's been subjected to the cancel culture, who has gone out publicly many, 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 many times and has said, when I was a young avant-garde director, that's what I did. I said some things and I did some things for the shock value, but I have grown as a human being and I'm not that person anymore. The big difference where he's concerned is he didn't hurt anybody in the process. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he didn't.
No, I realize
he didn't. He didn't Epstein anybody. He didn't Kevin Spacey anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like, there
are lines that you cross that there's no coming back from. Of course.
No, but the things that he said was pretty vulgar and pretty shocking, right?
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah.
So
no, absolutely.
But I think now everyone is so quick to be offended. Offended,
that's the other thing.
That's
it.
I
absolutely
and
agree.
There's no room for communication or talking or having different opinions. It's nope, you've offended me. That's it. You're done.
Well, that's just it. That goes back to everybody now has an opinion, and now everybody thinks that their opinion is just as valid as anybody else's, which may or may not be true. Yeah, exactly.
Well, unfortunately, again, we're coming back to the internet. At least my opinion is, because they can find like-minded individuals very easy.
Pack mentality
which
speaks a lot.
fuels their own view, good, bad, sideways, and that gives them the courage to behave in a certain way.
It's
good or bad.
They form their own little algorithm society where, if you search something more often enough, you're going to find a group of people who agree with that thing exclusively.
This is it ties very tightly into that whole subsection of fandom where it's not, we've gone well beyond gatekeeping and it's now toxic. Where
this is the point where you start to get to ridiculous.
Yeah, it gets into toxicity, and it's no longer just difference of opinion. It's my opinion is the only opinion, to the point where I feel the need to insult or put down or attack you because you don't share that.
Well, and then it's
your opinion doesn't matter. Yeah,
it's one extra step as well, that if they've decided that you are beneath them, then it's how you look, how you behave, what else you like. It's tacked on to that toxicity, right?
It's no surprise that, these celebrities are deleting their social media accounts. I just want to kind of get a feel from you guys. Like, when you reach a certain level of celebrity, do you feel that you have an obligation to use your celebrity power? I
don't think you're ever obligated to use it. I think it's a smart thing to do and a good way to further, yourself, your message, and your image.
Does it come, with the expectation, though, that Joe Public expects you, the politicians, to be above, to be beyond reproach? Do you think there's an expectation that comes with that?
That expectation comes. I don't think you're beholden to it. And I think that there are people who are fighting back against that currently.
I think when you have that level of celebrity, it comes with that response. The Spider-Man line, right?
With great power comes great responsibility.
So when you have an audience, and we're going to get into this a little bit later here in the conversation with some of these specific celebrities, but when you have the ability to mobilize tens of thousands of people with a single word, you have an obligation to use that power responsibly. And not everybody is doing that.
I think everything we're talking about tonight all comes down to the individual's base personality, right? Like, are they a good person or are they bad, right? Like, they're going to lean one way or another. And if it's a celebrity who is racist or is, this negative type of person, that's going to come across. Yeah. And if there's tons of celebrities out there that do charity work, that do fundraising, that are speaking up for all these lesser known things and situations.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm going to unpopular opinion here. I still have fond memories of Bill Cosby.
Oh, me too. In fact, I was thinking of
him recently. The man is a monster, but...
Yeah. It doesn't mean that I didn't appreciate his comedy. His stand-up comedy is some of the best comedy that, I'd heard as a child.
It's all clean until you get into some of his, he separates it, the clean stuff from the not clean stuff. He did amazing things for Black culture back in the day.
Yeah,
like he hired a psychologist, I think, to make sure that there was never a bad depiction of Black America in
you mean
shows.
On the Cosby Show?
Yeah, on the Cosby Show. Like, he did some great good, and then behind closed doors, he did some terrible awful. And,
well,
I'm not saying that one cancels out the other, but I'm saying, we're human, and we all have impulses, and when you suddenly have the power of tens of thousands behind you, power corrupts.
It certainly can. I mean, there's no question in my mind how some of these celebrities...
I am not excusing the actions of Bill Cosby or endorsing them in any...
but does his actions... You're saying you guys liked his comedy. Is it tarnished now, knowing what he's done?
Of course it is. I haven't gone out of my way to look at anything that Bill Cosby has done since he was sentenced.
And we're right back to J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter. It's the same situation. They're ingrained in that type of thing.
I mean, full circle moment. We're talking about that stuff, about hiding your opinion because you're afraid of being judged for it. This is it. Classic example. We all have these opinions about these celebrities who have done arguably really great work in their profession, but are absolutely horrible fucking human beings.
There was a joke that Bill Burr did about Kevin Spacey when he's talking about cancel culture.
Yeah.
And he's like, if that person could have just held out for a couple more months, we would be able to know how House of Cards ends.
Good joke.
Yeah, I take no credit for terrible delivery of someone else's joke, but
it's still a good joke.
The point stands. That show was incredible, and then it came out that he was this awful person, and now that show is tarnished by that brush.
Yeah.
Well, look what's happening to Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp
is a huge actor, been famous for years, huge films and characters, and now his ex-wife is, accusing him of being an abuser, and unfortunately,
just the accusation alone has destroyed his career.
Well, unfortunately, when he sued the newspaper that accused him of being, and he's lost that case, that's how he lost Fantastic Beasts character, and possibly the next Caribbean, he might get that back. I'm not sure, but there was no
They were trying to move him away from that for a while, actually, because I think they sensed that they were losing the audience because of the repetitive nature of those movies. But honestly,
that could just be general franchise burnout, though.
Yeah, that's true.
There is a flip side to this, though, where I have seen the movement to strike her down now.
Yeah.
Like through, Facebook
Well,
chats.
Trying to get her out of Aquaman.
Out of everything. Yeah.
Well, is that not a classic case of toxic fandom, right? You attack me, therefore I'm going to take my fan base and attack you, or the fan base independently?
I think it's the fan base independently. Because I think here's a
People
man who has a
boycotting
reputation.
Aquaman too.
What's that, Eric?
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to step on you there, Kim. I think you were about to say the same thing.
That's okay. Go ahead.
See, this is... I feel like I'm doing it right now.
Doing what?
Doing the whole gatekeeping thing, because I keep stepping on Kim, and you're trying to make a point, and I'm talking, and I'm not even thinking about the fact that I'm talking over you. And I think on some deep level, it's some societal thing where I'm like, well, I have an opinion, and this woman is talking,
Everybody wants
but
to
I
be
need
heard.
to get my opinion out.
Back of the room, woman.
Everybody wants to be heard.
I
in the
feel
corner.
awful. But
Well, you've
it's
acknowledged
something
it,
that
and
I'm
that's
just-
something.
That's growth.
That's
and I
right.
want to apologize for it.
It's all good.
All
Thank
right.
you. You're listening to Fandom Power.
Let's keep the show
But-
moving. I just want to circle back
Yeah.
to the original question was, what did we think about diversity casting in Hollywood? And Eric, I think we're very clear that
Diversity casting for
the
its
sake
own
of diversity
sake
casting, yeah,
is not great. Diversity casting, because you have a diverse set of roles,
Yeah.
just makes sense.
yeah. Any other
Like,
opinions on that?
cast a person for a role. Don't cast a person for their skin tone.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like, I would even bring it like with the Marvel Universe.
sure.
When you have so much source material and you're trying to sell a movie to that fan base, you should try, within reason, to stay as close to that source material as possible. Like, you look at the Fantastic Four reboot, and people frown so bad on it.
They did.
But Michael B. Jordan is great.
He is.
He was
yeah.
amazing
Oh,
in Black
he is
Panther.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Andy, I think what you're saying lends itself to what I was thinking is that I think that is where diversity casting suffers the most, is when it comes to adaptations of other properties.
Yeah. I saw a great interview clip with Stan Lee, and somebody asked him point blank about changing up the character, and specifically Spider-Man, in relation to making him, a new race. And Stan Lee gave his point blank answer, no, leave him as is and make a new character. It's way easier that way. And for all intents and purposes, you leave the original character as had been loved by the fandom, which in the end, it worked because Miles Morales is fantastic. And I don't think it would have worked if they had just done it as a reboot.
But it was going back to these corporate entities that want your money, and the people who make these decisions in Hollywood, where, like, for the longest time, like, let's go back and talk about some of these early comic book movies, and I'll mention actually one that may be getting a sequel here so many years later, the Constantine movie.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Casting Keanu Reeves, who is a dark-haired guy in the role and not an American, not a blonde-haired British guy, was met with a lot of criticism, but Hollywood at that time was not, hasn't really been willing to take those risks with comic book properties the same way that they are now. So they stuck to the tried and true formula of, we're going to cast what works. We're going to build on star power and other casting choices.
I want to mention, while we're talking about the early Marvel stuff, my favorite depiction of the Punisher is Thomas Jane.
Oh, in film?
In film.
Yeah, I like him as well.
I think that Bernthal did a great job on the TV show, but
Yes.
I still love that original movie. And then the short that what's his name? Ari Shankar? There was a short that someone did called Dirty Laundry. Look it up on YouTube.
Okay.
That is like a 5 or 10 minute short that has Thomas Jane as the Punisher
Oh, okay.
in this little short, and it's just a little tag, and then at the end of it, it shows the Punisher skull, and you're like, oh, it was the Punisher, and it was really cool. That was my favorite thing. And then they were like, no, we're going to go in this other direction for the sequel, Warzone, and
Right.
I think that's one of the ways. Like, again, I'm talking about swapping a white guy for a white guy, but
Sure.
at this point, they changed actors because they wanted to go in a different direction, and the actors didn't agree with it. So they're like, all right, we're gonna switch. But the guy knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And I sort of lost the point here, but I think that if you're going to change something, there's no problem. There's nothing wrong with iteration or innovation.
Yeah.
It's when you take that complete left turn, that's when people start objecting.
I think
especially when you're adapting something from an already established.
And that's why I said what I said. I think with these adaptations, whether it's a novelization or a comic book or another medium that's being translated to something that's more visual, that's where I think the biggest issues are, because you take these, going back to the whole idea of like diversity casting, I'm going to take the other side of that, because I'm all for it. I think diversity casting is great, especially if it does nothing to detract from the story, who cares? That's at its most simplest, who cares? And the one that came up recently, Andy, we talked about this the other day when they put out the concept art for the new costume for Starfire in the upcoming season of Titans, which looks great, by the way.
Yeah.
But it just brought out this whole, thing about why is Starfire an African-American actress? And I'm like, who cares?
She's an alien.
Right. So, and this was one of the online comments that I had plucked out, which I thought was priceless. The person had said, what? Did you want them to go and cast an orange-skinned alien girl? Like, how else were they? The White House. How else were they supposed to?
It's too easy.
How else were they supposed to do that? Like, how do you satisfy?
Well, look at the backlash Flash got with Iris.
Oh yeah, being an African American.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't care.
But someone who doesn't know the history of Flash, which I didn't really, totally
doesn't
cool.
Care.
Looks great.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's good.
And I know more about the Flash than you do. And guess what? I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the show. I think it's well written. It's fun. It's entertaining.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine too.
But I might be dating myself here, but Thomas Jane is not the first Punisher.
No, he's not. Not on the big screen.
Speaking of the blonde-haired white guy star power in the 80s.
Yeah.
Dolph Lundgren.
It
wasn't the greatest film ever made.
No, it was not.
But I really, really try hard not to talk about the live-action Marvel stuff before the turn of the century.
Oh, some of it was good. Cheese factor alone.
Yeah.
Flash Gordon.
I'm going to flip that over for a second. And just to sort of round out diversity casting, let's talk about for a second here, not an adaptation of a comic book property, but it could very well have been the Netflix production Sense8. That has to be. God. So you can't tell me, Eric. So is that a good oh my god or a bad oh my god?
That was easily the best show I've seen out of Netflix.
Tell me that is not. Tell me that entire show is not diversity casting.
But that's the whole point of the story.
I understand your point, but the point of the story was the diversity. It was not.
Absolutely.
It was. It was about
Absolutely.
seeing things from as many people's.
I think at the core of the show, the idea was that pods of 8 people connected. That was the core of the show.
All over the world.
That's right.
All the different people.
That's
that
right.
was the point of it.
But in order to have that equal representation, you had to have that diversity. But it wasn't about, the show wasn't written, with the, we gotta have, like, it was written for that way because Lana clearly wrote it for, we're gonna have a trans person in there. We're gonna have, strong representation by women. But I don't think it was the story supports that.
The story was built to support that concept.
Yeah.
So I think that is why I am less, I'm going to use the term offended, but offended's not what I mean, by that kind of diversity. Like, sure. If it serves the story, then it serves the story. Again, you're getting your science in my art here. When people are trying to, socially manipulate their audience by going, "Oh, look, we have a trans person. Isn't that trendy? Like, aren't we clever? We realize that that's a big hot button political issue, and we can reel in a section of the market that hasn't really been tapped before. Look how clever I am."
I think the big part that we're missing in this, and it's no fault of anyone on the panel, you, me, or Andy or Kim, is that
Is it that we're a bunch of white folks talking about diversity?
We're a bunch of cisgendered white people who can never, ever understand what it's like to not be represented, in pop culture, because we've been for decades, centuries.
Right. So stories like Sense8 and stories that are stories about that are great. And if these characters are filtering in, in stories that never had it before, all the better.
I would argue that if you didn't have any information on the sort of diversity issues, that Sense8 would be a great show for you to watch. Like, go watch it. It's not only is it a good show, but it'll give you a little bit of grounding in some of those issues. Like, Also, I just love that show, and I'm sad that it only got
we are too
a half season in a movie.
Yeah. We were disappointed that it didn't get to go on either.
So good. Then again, I liked The Cape, so my tastes are all over the place.
I also enjoyed The Cape. Andy, I've got it on DVD. I'll loan it to you.
I have not seen it.
I bought it on YouTube, so now I can watch it anywhere that I have an internet connection.
I was just looking at my notes here, and that was sort of one of the things I'd written down was this pack mentality when it comes to toxic fandom, and this. I think on some level, again, where it becomes even more apparent is these multi-generational fandoms. So things that have been around for a long time. So like going back to like the Edition Wars or Star Wars versus Star Trek, Marvel versus DC. These things, because they've been around for decades, they have enormous fan bases. And, some of these, it's interesting when it's like, I can have the conversation with you guys about why I like Star Wars over Star Trek. Now, I'm saying that in the context of the show. I like both of them, and there is room in my fandom for both of them because I enjoy them for different reasons. But from the position of, I'm a Star Wars guy, listen, I get it. But then you have these sub-communities within the individual fandoms about, like, I'm an original trilogy guy and nothing, everything else outside of that doesn't count.
I want to say I've never before heard of toxic fandom in relation to Star Wars specifically. I've never considered anything there toxic because, I'm not a fan of the prequel trilogies, but I'm not a fan of the sequel trilogies either. And as I said in the Star Wars show, honestly, I'm not really a Star Wars fan anymore at all because of, how my tastes have evolved.
Sure.
But I've never considered that those kinds of interactions were toxic before.
I think there's
again, that might be a positional thing because I'm
I wouldn't say those particular ones would be, but there is an element of it, like with Kelly Marie Tran.
Yeah,
she ran into a really hard element of that.
And that taps into what we were just talking about with the whole diversity casting, where I think people saw her as a diversity cast, and then her character didn't get as big of a role as maybe, that some people had hoped for. But
for people who don't know, what was her role?
Rose Tico.
The Rose. Okay.
Yeah, Rose Tico. Or Rose Tycho? Tycho? Yeah. And clearly, I just watched Rise of Skywalker again today, so she's kind of fresh in my mind. But she went from being this like pseudo love interest for Finn to being just a supporting like technician in Rise of Skywalker, and it's like, oh.
I think that's because you have directors that change, and
sure
the storyline kind of gets altered, and
there were a lot of fingers in that pie.
But you look at what happened to her and the vitriol that woman endured that drove her off of social media and to the brink of where she was not in a good space mentally. Yeah. And then the same
look at what happened to Finn.
Yes.
They built him up as this big, like, he's going to be this big thing, and then he's a footnote.
Yeah.
Again, I think that comes back to the directors changing. Like, certain storylines just got abandoned.
Yeah.
The same thing happened to Leslie Jones in the Lady Ghostbuster movie. People they attacked her because of her appearance. They attacked her because of her appearance, saying that she looked like a monkey.
Right.
They said horrific things to her, which, it really was.
It didn't help that she had a big verbal
That came after, though.
I know, but that didn't.
No, that
help.
doesn't help you sympathize with her when months later, when they announced the new Ghostbuster.
Afterlife.
When they announced Afterlife, and she went on a Twitter rant about what we made didn't count. Like, this is a bunch of fucking bullshit. Is basically what she said, and it was like, oh
no, what you made was AU and is not in the same continuity. That's why it's not being counted. That's what some might argue, but I don't know.
Yeah, so these instances of,
AU stands for alternate universe, just in case.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, okay. The toxicity, though, within these communities to attack other people and other groups of fans, and even within the same fandom, like, it's mind-boggling.
Fandoms cannibalize themselves so often. It's disgusting. I've got a whole thing to say about it, but I don't want to interrupt this thought. Once we're done here, I've got a little side note to give.
Sure. You were going to say, Kim?
I was just going to say, like, some of these actors, they are portraying fictional people. And they're getting the backlash, if it's a gay character and they're not gay. That's horrible. Or they must be gay, or they must be trans, or they must be,
Sure.
And to me, I kind of look at that strangely, because what they do in their personal life,
it's the old,
and what they do for work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's the Joffrey Baratheon syndrome.
If they're a good actor, it shouldn't matter, right? Like, don't overlook someone just because.
Or people getting attacked for something their characters have done, thinking that it's them.
Right. Like, it's the line is so jumbled.
There's things like, what was that movie? The Stephen Hawking movie. They got, I think it was Eddie Redmayne who played Stephen Hawking.
I'm going to have to go and look that
Yes,
one up.
he did.
Yeah. It was the guy from Fantastic Beasts. I think that's Eddie Redmayne. But people got mad at him because they're like, why aren't you hiring a disabled actor to play a disabled part? It's like, well, it's called acting.
That's right.
You're playing pretend to tell a story. Like, that's what it is.
This came up today in an article that I read regarding Schitt's Creek. David's boyfriend and husband, the character whose name escapes me. Kim, help me out here.
Sorry?
David's husband on Schitt's Creek.
Oh my goodness. His real name's Noel, I think. I could even have that wrong.
So he is a straight male playing a gay character, and so there was a lot. He'd sort of been asked point blank, "How do you feel about being a straight man being cast to play a gay guy?" And his response was really, really well composed. He was like, "I didn't really think of that." He's like, "Well, I kind of played him as if he was me, and if I was attracted to another person." Making no mention of like being gay, just like, how do I think this person would act if they were attracted to somebody? And isn't that just a very poetic?
Yeah.
He's doing his job. He's an actor.
Yeah.
Right?
Someone who's playing a part of a divorcee and who's never been
never
divorced.
been married.
Right. Or a mother who doesn't have children.
Sam Worthington playing a paraplegic in a wheelchair in Avatar.
Sam Worthington
The Rock
playing
a gay bouncer and Be Cool.
Yeah. Even though, like, I think we could agree that was largely a caricature and less of a...
Yeah, but still, like, why wouldn't you get a gay guy to play that role? It's a gay role.
That's true. That is true.
If you're going to make the stupid argument, you're going to get a stupid answer. That's ultimately my opinion. Like,
and again, like you say...
You can be upset, but why waste your energy on that? Like, there's so much other shit in the world going on, especially now.
I think if there were enough, if enough people who identified with whatever, in whatever way that they identify, were in those jobs, and they were, casting or at least competing for those jobs, maybe they would get them. But I don't know. I just don't know what the makeup is.
I don't have the data.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know the ratio of, of straight to gay or male to female or cisgender to trans or what. I don't know.
There is no informed opinion on this because you don't know who tried out for a role unless they go public. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So if you're not like out there going, oh, I was more qualified for this and I auditioned, but they took this other guy. Well, that's awful, but like maybe there were other reasons. Like there's a myriad of
They're a better
little
actor?
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Little titchy details that might change the situation.
We all have I think on some level, we all have this notion of like, well, it should always be the best person for the job. And that doesn't always happen.
If a meritocracy was possible.
But it doesn't happen. We just know that.
It's not
We know
possible.
it doesn't happen.
The last true meritocracy is the military, and we really don't want to talk about that.
Just circling back to the whole protection aspect of a fandom.
Yeah.
The Big Bang Theory portrays it in one episode where Sheldon introduces Amy to Indiana Jones, and she proceeds to poke holes in it. So, from the protection aspect, that is now ruined for him, and he goes out of his way to try and ruin something she loves.
Oh, yeah.
So, they come at it from a playful manner, but it's still not a good behavior.
They play it for comedy, but the reality is it's still...
It's a real thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more, where, and you can imagine from the perspective of her as a fan, it might have been hurtful. I want to talk a little bit more about that, and I want to get it into some of the more newsworthy stuff, like when toxic fandom becomes dangerous. And
well, just before we jump into that this kind of ties these two ideas together. But one of the things I wanted to talk about here was I've had for a number of years I was a volunteer worker at a convention called RTX, which is the Rooster Teeth Expo down in Austin, Texas.
Yeah. Literally
the first time I went, I applied to be a volunteer, and I was like, there's no way they're ever going to pick me to be a volunteer, to, get to interact with these internet celebrities. And I got picked. And it must have been something that I put in the answer to the interview questions or whatever, but they're like, yeah, you know what? You. And I was really big into the fandom for Rooster Teeth at that point.
Yeah, okay.
And it felt like vilifying just to be like, oh my God, these people that I'm a huge fan of, they picked me. And it was so incredible, and I felt so honored, and I went into it, I was like, I'm going to do the best job I possibly can.
Yeah.
I love these people. I love that they've done this for me. I can't believe it. I get to be part of this bigger thing. And I went. And I sort of, put on this persona, a little bit of my retail persona.
Okay.
Because you're working with fans and you want to make sure everyone's pleased and you're putting on a good face for people and you're representing the company well. Yeah, professionalism. And the fans that I interacted with, for the most part, were just awesome regular fans. And they were coming together. They were meeting other fans. They were getting different views on their favorite franchises and whatnot. And they were having a good time. And then you could very easily tell the people that were not there because they wanted to be, like the parents of the younger fans, or the people who are that the fifth wheel in the friend group, who's just not into the same thing, but they don't want to be excluded. Because when people are really passionate about something, and we keep going back to that word, but when they're really passionate about something, you can feel it. It's tangible. It's something you can almost reach out and touch. Don't touch other people without the permission, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But you go to these conventions, and you're literally, it's the physical embodiment of those algorithm societies I was talking about. Like, everybody here came here because they love a thing. Whether it's, one aspect of it, or the characters, or the storyline, or just the way the graphics are presented, or whatever. They're a fan of this thing. And when you're surrounded by people who love the same things you do, you feel powerful. Like, you feel like there is nothing like that sense of belonging to change the way that you are. I was a very depressive person when I was much younger.
Yeah.
I had a very low self-esteem. I had a very low self-image of myself.
Okay.
And I maintain that being picked and going to this event is what changed me for one of the things that changed me for the better.
Right.
Because I now suddenly had a group of people that I belonged to.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's the feeling.
Yeah.
That starts some of this stuff. And it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to feel like you belong, like you're accepted, like
yeah,
it
comes from a good place.
You don't have to hide that you like this goofy show on the internet.
Right.
You finally found your tribe.
You found your exactly. You found your tribe, and through that I made some really good friends, some people who I've been able to talk to about the harder parts of my life and not feel bad about it because I know they have this same sort of base level of interest.
Right.
And that kind of thing is some of the most powerful stuff that I've experienced, and it literally just came from a whim.
Right.
And it inserted me into this larger thing. But as time has gone on, for a little bit of background, Rooster Teeth as a company, they've had a bunch of controversies lately. They've had a bunch of people that have left due to, again, they were having inappropriate interactions with fans, and, you know, that power had been used in ways that it shouldn't have.
Right.
And the company's going through a lot of, I'm going to call them growing pains.
Okay.
Because they are becoming larger. And as that sort of stuff has happened, I guess I have withdrawn a little bit from being a fan of the company, just because, you know, when you see something like that crumbling, you want to like when something you love is falling apart.
Yeah, so
you know what I mean?
You're standing in the boat that's taken on water, and you're trying to make the decision: do you start bailing, or do you jump out?
Or do you bail? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I will always have a place in my heart for the people that I met and the friends that I made.
Right.
But I'm interacting less and less with the property itself.
Gotcha.
So, you know, it just goes to say that people do evolve. Your tastes do change over time.
Yeah.
And, you know, that toxicity, again, it usually starts from a place of joy.
Yeah.
And
ultimately,
that's, you know, a complicated thing to grasp, that something that can be so vile comes from somebody's absolute love and joy for something.
And I mean, that takes us right back to the opening statement of the show, where like all of this stuff ultimately stems from a passion, whether it's a healthy passion or not. Well, I mean, that kind of goes with the individual.
And then you get into this more scary stuff that's happening. And there's an example from this convention. There was a fan who showed up randomly at this couple. They're very famous people in the circles that, you know, of people who watch these internet videos.
Sure.
The very famous couple, somebody just showed up at their house with a gun, and
well, that's never cool.
No, not even slightly.
No.
And it was a fan who had some issue with them, or with something that happened with them, either in a video or at the company or whatever, and showed up at their house.
Right.
And it was a big to-do, and that's when, you know, toxicity becomes actual, like, poison. Like
right.
Something that can actually hurt people.
So now we're like square into that. It's now dangerous territory, which is kind of where I want to go next anyway. So when we talk about fandom and the toxicity of fans and the potential for toxic fandom to become dangerous, like, you know, that is tantamount to probably the biggest, most serious example that you could cite. But there are some other ones too, like, I think we talked about this the other day. Like, I'm not a Rick and Morty fan, so I wasn't aware of this when I was kind of doing notes for the show. But apparently, Rick and Morty had a promotion with McDonald's.
I don't know that they actually
can
had
explain
a promotion, but they do reference it.
Yeah,
so they referenced it in one of their episodes, because back in the day, McDonald's did a promotion for the release of the Mulan movie.
Right.
Where they had this Szechuan sauce. And
that's right.
It was the best sauce that has ever been available at McDonald's. It was fantastic. and people have these fond memories of it, and then they discontinued it. And people have been telling them for years, like, hey, you really need to bring back the Szechuan sauce. So Rick and Morty, in their season premiere for, I think, season 3 or 4, I can't remember which one.
3, I believe.
Yeah, they go into Rick's memories, and he drives up to a McDonald's and is like, he orders a bucket of Szechuan sauce. And he's like, this is the only place I can experience this sauce is in my memories.
Right.
So the joke is, like, they brought back this Szechuan sauce, and they're like, oh, the whole point of this TV show is just to get the Szechuan sauce back in McDonald's. And there was this big to-do, and everyone went on social media, and McDonald's was like, maybe we'll do it. And then they did it. And that's where the controversy started.
Yeah, I mean, and that controversy went as far as, like, in at least one location in Los Angeles, when they ran out of sauce, fans were going nuts to the point where employees were getting assaulted.
That's so fucking stupid.
So, I mean, like, how can you do these heinous things really in the name of your fandom, right? I mean, that's where it stems from. You're so passionate about this thing where it's like, you got to give me my sauce, and you don't get it, so you're going to assault somebody because of it?
I love that show, but I have no intentions of going to McDonald's looking for this sauce.
Right.
I don't care.
I mean,
how good it is.
there's a Helen of Troy reference to be made here, but at the same time, like, ridiculousness is ridiculousness.
So let's go to the next one, which is, and you can probably relate to this too, Eric, is in the video game community, particularly in the world of online gaming, particularly online shooters. Doxing generally in internet culture, the idea of going online and finding somebody's personal information and then releasing it to the public with malicious intent to cause harm.
I mean, this speaks a little bit more closely to the dangers of what information about you is available online than it does to how likely you are to interact with a crazy person. But I agree.
Part and parcel why Facebook has a policy on the sharing of personal information and how it's not allowed. It's with their own community standards. You can't go publishing stuff about people that's not part of their public profile.
Yeah,
because
it's a tough one.
When we dig right down to it, I mean, the worst case of this, really, we go back to the 2017 incident, the swatting incident, where the Andrew Finch on December 28th, 2017, a caller falsely claimed to be inside with hostages and a gun, a style of prank known as swatting. Finch, unaware of the false report, answered the door and was fatally shot on his porch by officers who had surrounded his home. All while playing Call of Duty, and I guess the incident sparked from some argument the two of them had over a piece of content. And you know what the real ridiculous part of this is? The content had a $1.50 US value, and now somebody's dead.
I think that was happening quite a bit.
A few times. The swatting thing had happened quite a bit. It made the news several times. We haven't seen much about that lately, but I mean, this is ultimately the worst possible scenario that you could possibly imagine, is that, somebody's killed. And
let's
all
be
in the
clear,
name of their family.
Swatting is in no way a prank.
No, it's not.
That is a crime.
It absolutely is.
If there's a line, that is way far beyond it.
That's you're so far past the line that it might as well be the horizon.
But let's go back and let's look at that, and even the Rick and Morty thing. Both McDonald's and the publishers and developers of Call of Duty, they both essentially said the same thing. And you know what they said? They didn't denounce the actions of those people, what they had done. And what they did was, we appreciate that our fans are passionate.
That's bad marketing.
At some point, it stops becoming passion.
Right. So, like, this is why I think I started the show off with saying, all these things stem from a place of passion. But at what point is it not passion anymore and it's something else, something sinister?
I think it's the point where it leaves the fictional and causes a real life effect.
Yeah.
like, no matter whether that effect is, you know, somebody calling somebody else a racial slur on a forum, or somebody assaulting someone over some Szechuan sauce, which is delicious, by the way.
In fact, the accused, who is now actually the sentenced, the accused at the time when he was approached by media had actually said that he didn't feel like his actions, that he didn't kill anybody because he was not a uniformed police officer who in fact was standing there on the porch. That it wasn't his fault.
They wouldn't have been on the porch, bud.
Well, the district court disagreed, and last year he was sentenced, I think, to 20 years in prison. So a judge disagreed that and found him that he was responsible.
For sure. Without his actions, that person would still be alive.
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I think this point really illustrates how severe the problem potentially is. I don't know. We don't hear a lot about this stuff anymore. Does that mean that it's not happening? I would say.
Oh, no, it still happens constantly.
Sure. So just going back to that, you know, it's not just the fans. That whole idea that a celebrity maybe has some obligation to use their power wisely. You do have celebrities out there who are, you know, whether they admit it or not, or whether they think they are, they say the right thing and their fans go off the deep end and people get hurt. You know, there's the Nicki Minaj thing we were talking about the other day about how a fan had written something, made a Twitter post about her, you know, maybe writing something that was more adult, and had made a few, you know, off remarks about her. And I said that to Kim the other day, and you'd had a different opinion at the time where it was like, well, that's a personal attack. And on some level that's true, but if I personally attack you, you're the one responding to me. If I personally attack...
Well, I had said that because Nikki responded to this.
She did.
Right.
She did.
Which is kind of a fine line, right? You have a huge following.
Yeah. People
are hanging on to every word you say. This woman has critiqued you.
Yep.
Good, bad, indifferent. But because of the, I don't want to say power, but in essence, the power of people listening to you, you retaliating against this woman has now given the gates, you've opened them up for
the floodgates.
Your fans to now attack this woman, where if you had just not said anything.
Yep.
Yeah, it's that old adage of if you want to control Rome, you have to control the mob.
So I think it speaks to the idea that there's the potential for these people. And when I say celebrities, I include the people that you refer to, Eric, through your RTX experiences. These include internet celebrities who with a word make no mistake, they have the ability to weaponize their fans.
Oh my God, so easily.
And there's really no other way to put that. It's not funny. It's not a prank.
It's terrifying.
It's not a joke. When you've got tens of thousands of people who, at your beck and call will do stupid shit because you're one of those guys, like you're a Logan Paul who will do stupid shit. So you
said the name.
Like attracts like. But let's not forget that guy, was it him or is it the other guy, the video game guy? I think it's PewDiePie.
What, Pewds?
PewDiePie, who basically for a decade, his video content is like, it's laced with misogyny and rape jokes and just really terrible things. But, hey, all for the sake of entertainment. And yet...
all for the lulls.
Right. And, these people have this influence where they again, it's a crazy amount of power that celebrity can wield, and if it's not...
And celebrity has changed.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you used to have to, earn that shit.
Well, it's not just...
Now?
It's not just movie stars and rock stars anymore. It's...
Again...
Any idiot in his fucking basement can become a multi-million-dollar...
Well, this is it. I mean, we live in the world where YouTube is a career option. You know what I mean? Like, it just... There's a time when I couldn't fathom that. And now, I look at some of the people some of the channels that I follow. In fact, one of my favorite YouTubers who hasn't been releasing a lot of content lately put out a video this week to say, hey, I know there hasn't been a lot of content, but he's like, I'm a 10 million plus YouTube channel, and I'm one of the few 10 million plus who still do everything by myself. You know, like these...
Yeah, once you get to that point, there's usually a team involved.
Yeah, exactly. And for him, there isn't. It's just him. He's a one-man show. But yeah, like...
That's impressive.
A 10 million plus subscription following for, you know, just Joe Blow in the UK, like, that was unheard of, you know, 20 years ago. Anyway, I think I've kind of hit on everything that I wanted to touch on in terms of the idea of gatekeeping and toxic fandom. We could keep going around and we could start hitting on more specific examples, and maybe we will. Maybe we'll come back to it one day and we'll do a friendly, you know, we'll do a Marvel versus DC, or we'll do a Star Wars versus Star Trek, and we'll actually
I think that's a whole other show.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you guys have any closing thoughts you want to add before we sign off?
I don't think so.
Not really. I mean, I guess the only thing I want to say is, like, you as a person are the collected experiences that you've had. And the more varied and different experiences that you have, the better equipped you'll be to deal with these types of issues. So just go out and experience some new stuff, man. Like, take a look at something from an angle you've never tried before. Talk to different people about things. Be less afraid of being judged, and just, like, it doesn't pay to be poisoned, dude.
No, it certainly doesn't.
Nobody likes that guy. Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Well, I think if I could just put a final thought on it, I just want to end it by saying words hurt, and it doesn't matter if it's face-to-face or 10,000 miles away behind a keyboard. It hurts just as much. So I hope, if anything, you know, the next time
Don't be that guy.
The next time you're online and you're digging down on your favorite fandom because they just released a new version of whatever it is, and you're going through the comment section, that before you hit enter and you put that out in the world for everybody, just think about how you'd feel if it was coming back at you.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it for me. I'm Wes. This is Fandom Power. I want to thank my guests. I want to thank my lovely wife, Kim, my recording partner, my producer and editor, Andy, and our good friend, Eric. Thanks again for coming out tonight and doing this with me. And
anytime.
Let's do it again sometime, guys.
That was good.
Cheers.
All right. That's it for me. Bye for now.
Be excellent to each other.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Fandom Power. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll be talking about another one of your favorite fandoms. Fandom Power is a Sawcast production.